I have decided I would like to be known as a thought provoker, not necessarily a thought leader. So I will leave you with that and hope that I provoke some thoughts today. So when I think about the agile promise of more innovation, right? If we have short feedback loops, then how do we make that happen inside the organization? And for me, this is all about management innovation. Let me make sure I'm here. There. Okay. So let me give you a quick agile transformation story. Senior leader says we need a transformation. That means everybody else gets training, right? So they start with the teams, they train them. It happens to be, well, it does not matter the framework that they use. So they choose a framework, everybody gets trained, and then they're supposed to do Agile by the book, right? So they have this framework, no deviation from the framework. I'm not so sure that that's an Agile transformation at all. I'm not sure it's a transformation at all, except to possibly help the teams that do the work. But notice there's no adaptation of any of the systems inside the organization. And that's, I don't see how you do that. So if you do only education and training for the teams, that's the very tip of the iceberg. All the stuff that's about culture has to happen lower down across the organization. I think of it as how do we make all of this happen throughout the organization? The way we make that happen is with management innovation. So when we innovate the management systems, we can create and refine the agile culture. So I'm going to talk about 3 myths, only 3, that stifle innovation. And that's because they say we need to standardize and how people work. That was the transformation framework installation. Every time I hear install a framework, a little, I I think a little agile angel just dies. That we think that 100% utilization of people works, and that performance management creates employee engagement. I hope that all of you are rolling your eyes a little bit. I will try and refrain from rolling my eyes as we're here. So let me talk about the first myth, that we can use one standard agile process. So in my little story, the senior leadership really thought that installing a framework for all teams would work. And that means that all teams kind of look the same as these bottles over here, right? They might do slightly different things. I think of a program as, well, a program is several teams, multiple teams where they all focus their work on one business deliverable. So, but all the teams do roughly the same thing. That means that if we have one standard agile process, that all the teams have the same work and the same pressures. I don't know of any organization where all the teams have the same work and the same pressures. One organization has teams that do roughly iteration-based work on a regular basis. They find Scrum is really helpful for them. They are quite happy with the start of the iteration and the end of the iteration. They have figured out how to pretty much right-size their stories. They can pretty well predict what they're going to do next. They really have a nice rhythm. Scrum offers them that nice rhythm. In the same organization, another team does production support. Now, I might not want a given team to do production support. I might want production support to go back into the teams that created those problems. That they don't like. Anytime I suggest that to them, they say, "No, Johanna, we like it like this." Fine. I'm not going to impose on them. So, but that team that does production support cannot use an iteration-based approach. They need to be able to interrupt what they're doing, even if they're doing a production support issue, if something more important comes in. So not every team can use the same approach. And this is one of those issues that I really wish more organizations would think about, that all the teams work differently. So instead of standardization, I think that we can, if we ask people to say, what is the business outcome this team or this department or this group or this chunk of people want to achieve, that's the overarching goal. And are there guidelines? One of my clients actually said, I just want to deliver something every week and not break anything, right? That was the guideline, release something every week. The constraint, don't break the existing product. And then make sure that managers delegate problems and outcomes, not tasks. And if we allow all of this, we can then learn fast from experiments. Just because I happen to like a certain agile approach does not mean it's right for everybody. And the more I learn about teams that have really adapted their agile approach to their needs, I should say, that they can almost make that go up the organization, and the managers can adapt the agile approaches to what they need to do in the organization. So yes, every team needs to create their own agile approach. Let me talk about the second myth. This is the myth of 100% utilization. So you see this picture over here. This is 100% utilization. This highway is not moving at all. There is no movement in where all the cars are. The highway looks like a parking lot. And one of the things I see is we have 100%. We have this 100% utilization is the idea of resource efficiency. That when everybody is busy, we will get more work out of them. And that means that we have to optimize for outputs. We're not optimizing for outcomes, what a customer could use, a business outcome, any of that. We instead optimize to keep everybody busy, and we slice features and we slice outcomes into little tiny tasks. I have yet to see that work really well with an agile approach. So instead, if we can optimize for deliverables and for value, so I'm gonna just do a little side note on architecture. A lot of times, I see architects work really hard in preparation for a team doing their work. Totally reasonable. We might need somebody to do some experimentation, some iteration before we have shaped the work for a given team. However, when those same architects say, you team one, you do this part of the product, and especially if they slice according to the architecture, right? The UI team does this thing. The middleware team does that thing. The platform team does that thing. We all know none of that works in an agile organization. We know we are less likely to get the final deliverable unless we actually slice through the architecture. So all of this is about resource efficiency thinking. And how do we change resource efficiency thinking? We can change it by focusing on the flow of the work, not the person. So in resource efficiency, the top picture on the right, it looks really, really efficient, right? The work comes in, we hand it off to the first person, that person does their output, right? To the second person, they do their output, to the third person, however many people they have. But notice all those arrows in between all those little people. All those arrows are sources of delays. And the more projects people work on, because they're not busy, right? They're waiting for the next piece of work, or the more items they take, then the more delays people have. We have significant multitasking costs in our organizations, even with an agile approach. If the teams do not work in flow efficiency. So if you have a team that works in flow efficiency, they work together. Now, does the entire team have to work together? Maybe they work in triads. Maybe they work in pairs. Maybe they work as a mob. I have found that the more the team works together in some way, the less they need a lot of the rituals from many of the frameworks. So think about it. How often do you need to do a stand up with your team? I find that stand-ups can be quite useful. So for example, when I recommend a team swarms around a piece of work, then everybody does their own thing, right? They first get together as a team, they understand what the work is, they frame what each of them will do, they go off to their own direction, they do their own thing. The UI person does their stuff, the middleware person does their stuff, the app layer does their stuff, the platform does their stuff, the testers do their thing. Every so often they come back together, right? They're working on one story, but they're swarming to their own areas of expertise. They might do something that looks a lot like a stand-up, but it does not need to take 15 minutes every hour or 90 minutes, right? So they get back together for a few minutes. They say, where are you? Anyone have any trouble? Anybody need help? That all is fine. At the end, as people finish their work, they now ask, who can I support? How can I help you to finish your work? And then people start to pair. So swarming is different than mobbing, but is still a part of flow efficiency. And that's very, very different than people handing off their work. So we have all kinds of ways to focus on the flow of the work, not the people. The more we focus on what an individual person does, the less we have flow efficiency. Now, can we all work in flow efficiency all the time? I'm not sure. I find that mobbing is a really effective and efficient way to work in the organization. And it does not work for absolutely everybody or every team, or certainly not for managers. Managers, by design, in multitask because they have more more distribution of what they need to look at. They are not looking at one product, they're looking at several issues, several products across the organization. So instead of utilization, let's decide why the organization exists. What is the overarching goal that a team needs to support, right? If we start to think of how do we manage to that overarching goal, the team will say, well, let's do this way, let's do that way. They have all kinds of ways to do this. And if we can reduce the organizational work in progress and definitely decide what not to do for now, then the teams can focus. And I always like to ask, what kinds of experiments can you use to reduce or eliminate the wait states? Because the wait states probably kill you. So let's limit the organizational whip to support the flow of work through the teams. All right, let me performance management does not work at all, and it certainly does not create engagement. So it does not work in many, many ways. How can you rank people in the organization? I hope that those of you in Europe and across Asia have figured out that ranking does not work. Here in the US, we love ranking. This is just silly. You cannot compare people or teams because people and teams do different work, and competition doesn't work. Oh, let's pit team A against team B. That's totally nuts. Every time you try and do performance management, you create pay disparity. and it's all about evaluating on subordinate goals. So the purpose of comparing is to say, oh, this team does this and this team does that better, or this person does this and that person does this better. I don't see how we can compare anything that people do. We are all individuals and we all contribute to the greater whole, the greater good. So instead of performance management, managers definitely need one-on-ones to build that trusting relationship. And I really like goals that support the entire team. When we focus on autonomy, mastery, and purpose, now we enable all that inner motivation to come out, and people will say, "Yeah, I can contribute to all of this, all by myself and with my team, and I can learn as I do this." I am a very big fan of some form of team-based compensation where we do some individual compensation and some team-based compensation. And then the whole idea of a jungle gym career ladder based on influence, not individual achievement. I don't see how we can understand what one individual does as opposed to an agile team. I just don't see it. So every time we want to do performance management, we prevent business agility because now we are focused back on resource efficiency when an individual does, and we start to break up the work so we can make some kind of performance management fair. So there are these three common ideas. How can we create and work towards one overarching goal? How can we have small experiments to optimize our learning? How do we learn early? And how can we collaborate in small world networks across the organization? The more we think about how do we move from resource efficiency to flow efficiency, how can we have more frequent adaptation, even inside a framework? I'm not opposed to frameworks. And how can we collaborate more? Those are the three big ideas. And those require management innovation. When we have management innovation, we optimize for change as opposed to manage change. So I put this in all my slides because I really want to stay in touch with you, and I'm going to stop the share.